All right. Well, thank you for being here. And thank you for volunteering to be our site monitors. It's one of the most important positions in the company. Um, we really we couldn't do any of this without you guys. There's no way Scott and I could take all this on by ourselves. This is just so important to have. So starting off, what is site monitoring? What is it? Well, site monitoring in its essence is the in-person inspection of our protected properties. It includes a written report, and it also must be done annually. Does anybody have any questions before I move on and get into the nitty-gritty of it? So, why do we monitor? Well, first, it's we're looking for changes that are affecting our core values as our company. We're looking to protect future easements and ownership of the fee title properties. We'll go into more specifics about the two different properties after this. We also need to develop written record of the site and its changes over time. We're building relationships with the easement landowners, and we're also fulfilling the Land Trust Alliance accreditation requirement. An analogy I like to use for this is when you go to the doctor for your annual visit each year, they're tracking your vitals, they're tracking your health every single year. In 10 years, you have a whole catalog of yourself and how you've changed and grown or things that they found and whatnot. It's the same with these properties. Each year, our monitors are going out and taking a record and doing the health check on the property so that we have a written record and report that we can go back to um, year after year as well. Any questions about this at all? The two types of properties. The first one is the most basic. This is the most common. It's called the fee title property. Prairie enthusiasts own these properties outright. We're able to exercise all legal ownership rights. It may also be protected by an easement. We'll talk about that specific later. Fee title properties are given management plans. And they're also subject to damage and threats to ownership, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So the first one is fee title. The second one is conservation easement. An easement is a contract between a landowner, a third party, and the prairie enthusiasts. Landowners retain ownership but are restricted in future developments. It's designed for um, perpetuity and registered with the actual deed and runs with the property title. So it is recorded with the county on the deed itself, the easement. The terms of these easements are flexible. They change, they're different for each property. Easements do not get management reports. They actually get what's called a baseline report. And that's done at the initial, when the property is first purchased or the easement is first created. And these easements, they require a long-term commitment, not just from us, but also for the owner. Now, for an easement, the owners do change. Since this is supposed to be a long-term thing, many a times, like for example, this year, some of our properties that we have easements for have taken on new ownerships. So say the original owners pass away and they will the property to their children or grandchildren. The new owners are required to uphold the easement that has been written with the prairie enthusiasts. Um, that's why a relationship with these owners of the easements is so important because we we want to be involved. We want them to know that we are dedicated to keeping up with our end, so long as they keep up with theirs. So Scott might talk a little bit more about this one, but this is an example where one of our properties, the Pleasant Valley Conservancy, is actually, which is a fee title property, is actually located within the Brock easement. Scott, did you want to give a little bit of specifics about this
Well,
property?
the reason for this slide is in the landscape software and elsewhere, we refer to this term stewardship sites. And a stewardship site is basically just a single unit for management purposes. So the Pleasant Valley Conservancy is managed as a single unit, but in terms of the way it's divided up, there's a fee title property in the middle of it that TPE owns, and then it's actually not the Brocks anymore. They have a thing called the Oak Savannah or Savannah Oak Foundation that owns the easement of the surrounding property, but they're all managed together as a single unit. Another example is the Mounds View grassland, which is TPE's largest property. It's all fee title property, but they're actually, so far anyway, 7 separate properties that have been put together and are managed as a single unit, and we'll probably be adding more in the future. So we have 7 deeds and, et cetera, but it's all managed as a single stewardship site. So this is just to make clear what that term stewardship site means. What you're being asked to monitor is actually a stewardship site, not the individual units. That's why we use this terminology.
Thank you. Are there any questions about this? I know it can be a little confusing. Cool.
So that would just be one site report
Yes.
put together, yeah, in one
Correct.
site visit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can ignore the internal boundaries, basically.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, the responsibilities. We expect there to be an inspection, an actual inspection, at least once a year. Now, we encourage you to go to your sites as many times as you want. We actually that would be best case scenario. You want to become as familiar as you can possibly be with your site. The more you know it, the easier it's going to be for you to write up your reports each year. You can also easily identify things that have changed. In your responsibilities, we'll ask you to take photos, make notes. You want to identify and document any potential issues, and we'll go over some specifics of issues that have come up in the past. And then at the end of your on-site inspection, you'll prepare and submit a written report within 3 months of the visit. It's really important to do the actual report as soon as possible after the inspection while it's still fresh on your mind. Sometimes if you do the inspection and then take all your notes and take pictures and then sit on it for a little while, you kind of will forget a lot of the things that popped out at you as well. Are there any questions here, or am I going too fast at all for this? Great. What to look out for? A lot of these might apply to the easements because those have a third party on site as well. But even with our fee title properties, things do happen, and it's it's important to make sure that things like new structures and roads and trails or construction and other major use are in the protected boundaries. Damage to the existing structures, such as signage or fencing. Alterations from fire, wind, and just elements in general. They definitely play a big aspect in things. Significant trash or waste dumping. We do open our sites to hunters and even to the public too in some cases. So, as hunters go, at least in my backyard, in my property, I will go walk it at the end of the season and find all sorts of just camping debris and just trash and things that we have to constantly clean up. And it's the same with our properties as well. Now, that's not your job to clean that up, but we're looking for people who may have left waste or things like that, and that's a whole nother thing we'll talk about. Major changes in the management and vegetation, and issues identified in previous monitoring reports. There are some properties that we'll talk about a little bit later who have ongoing issues with neighbors encroaching and whatnot, and we've made requests of them to change that. So it's important to see the status of how active they're changing those issues. Any questions about this slide at all? Excellent. Scott, would you like to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, these are just two examples of some issues. Yeah, if you can go, well, you can leave it where it is. So these are two properties that I do or have done the monitoring on. The first is the Prairie easement. This is located right outside the village of Prairie du Sac. And although I don't think of Prairie du Sac as an urban area, it actually has some of the issues of being in an urban area. There's a housing development that's been going up along the southern and eastern sides of the property. As you can see there are actually some new houses on the southern side. And on the western side is actually a major regional hospital. So, so this one's kind of surrounded. We've been having issues with these houses in the southeast corner where the arrow is pointing out. This property has a characteristic that's similar to a lot of properties, at least in Wisconsin, that the original fence lines are about 10 or 15 feet back from the property line. And when these houses were built, the homeowners were told by the developer that their property extended all the way up to the old fence line. And so they treated basically that 10 or 15-foot area that's actually Maley property as part of their backyard. And when I did the monitoring in 2021, this is a photo facing west from the southeast corner. The boundary of the property actually runs right down the middle of this photo. And we had been talking to all these adjacent landowners. They had yard waste, they had little lawn tchotchkes and all kinds of things back there. And I was very pleased to see that they had cleared this out. And so we were now ready to go ahead, and we'd had this property resurveyed in 2018. There were survey markers, and we were going to convert those to permanent signage, just so everybody would be aware. And we did this really carefully with a lot of in-person discussions, et cetera, and letters and all that kind of stuff. So when I came back last year, if you can go to the next thing, this is what I saw from the same spot. So the woman who owns the house in the very southeast corner had put up this stone wall. And the wall is right on the property line. There were two survey stakes, and she used those to put the wall right on the line. And so that's not a problem. I didn't particularly like the little gnome there, but that's her issue. So the wall itself was not a problem. The problem came in as she then hired somebody else to put up this concrete moat around the outside of the wall, kind of a retaining thing. And they put that onto the Maley property. And we know this because there are survey markers on either end of this wall. And she knew where they were. And so, so this was basically an encroachment. And does this affect the conservation values of the property? No, not at all. In fact, part of the reason we've been so careful about this is we're planning to use this thing to the right of the picture as a mode fire break, so we can get vehicles up into that corner of the property when we're doing burns on it. However, because we had spent all this effort talking to all the neighbors to get all their stuff off our property, if we let her, encroach like this, it was going to potentially create other problems for us down the road. So we took some immediate action on this and sent her some letters and had some discussions with her, and eventually she had the part of the concrete moat that was encroaching on our property removed. And it's too bad because she paid to have it put there, and then she had to pay to have it removed. But we had to kind of stick by our guns on this thing. This was not the only one, but problem we've had on this particular easement, and it is a real challenge when you've got very close neighbors in kind of an urban setting like this to make sure things are protected. So that was the first one. The second example is kind of interesting. This is the Sugar River Savannah in Verona. And this was the basically the family farm for Rich Henderson. And the house that you're looking at here is the house he grew up in and where he and Kathy live today. And in 2007, they did a bargain sale of this property to the Prairie enthusiasts. We got Knowles Nelson stewardship money to pay for the part that we purchased. And so this area that had been their farm is now a fee title property of the Prairie enthusiasts. And when I did the survey for the first time using the landscape software, one of the really nice things about landscape is it has the property boundaries overlaid on the physical map. And so you can actually see where you are, and it's pretty accurate. It's not, surveyor grade, but it's accurate to within a foot or two. The map that is used in landscape is actually based on the legal description of the property that's in the deed. They translate that into basically GIS coordinates. So I was kind of surprised when I got down near the corner of the property with my landscape, on my phone, and saw that the corner of the property was right in the middle of Rich's raised beds where he grows prairie seedlings all the time. And that the property line runs within about 10 feet of his house. And a lot of his wood pile, his propane tank, and a bunch of other things are actually on TPE property. And this property had been monitored several times previously. We started actively monitoring in about 2017, but nobody had documented this before. I think because they hadn't dared to do it or something like that, or just sort of walked on by and assumed it was okay. So when I asked Rich about it, he said, "Oh yeah, when we did this deal, we thought the line was actually in the wrong place, but we never did anything about it." And this is clearly a problem because he's encroaching on our property. We're not that worried about Rich Henderson doing that particularly, but this has to be resolved before this house can be sold. The house is not, that's his property, but it's actually in violation of the Verona zoning ordinances. There needs to be more of a setback than that. And this house needs a backyard. So this has to get resolved, but it's complicated because the DNR has an easement on our fee title property because of the Knowles Nelson stewardship funding. So that's a problem, and the Land Protection Committee is actually trying to figure out what to do about this. We're working with the DNR. We haven't figured out a good solution yet, but we need to figure that out. So this is an example of something that, and I bring this up for two reasons. One is this is some part of the power of using this landscape software when you're doing the monitoring. But it also is, just because something's been that way for a long time doesn't mean it's not a problem. And your job as a monitor is to raise the issue. It's the job of other people, the staff and board and land protection committee of TPE and so the landowner and others to figure out how to resolve it. But your job is to identify issues and raise them. And this one is definitely an issue.
Special considerations for easements. We ask that you be familiar with the protected and unprotected areas of the property. So again, just become familiar with your sites, and it just makes your job that much easier.
Yeah, and one thing I'll point out, I was just before we started this training session having a discussion with uh, Chris Miller about this. Some of our easements are quite complicated in terms of what's protected and unprotected. And there are some terms in the easement that are kind of buried in there. And one of the things we're going to be doing in the future is creating kind of a guide document for the monitor that translates the legal contract language of the easement into things that you should be watching out for, or area making clear what areas are not protected by the easement, et cetera, so that this will be clear, because it can be really hard to pick those out of this complicated easement language. So we're going to do that translation going forward. Most of our easements are pretty simple, but a couple of them at least are pretty complicated that way.
Um, the next thing to consider is to contact the landowners, and you can even invite them. I've already gone ahead and reached out to all the easement owners for you and just let them know that between now and the end of the year that you will be conducting this inspection. And I also asked if they wanted to participate, but it's usually very rare that they actually want to participate. They just welcome you to the property whenever you're able to get the chance. If you do happen to see them there, or they did decide to participate in your inspection, please, please, please just listen carefully, listen to them. They have tons of information and are very, very familiar with the site. You'll learn a lot from them. And more than anything, it's about just building the relationship and retaining and maintaining that relationship with them for future. And again, please do not give them permission for anything or pouring out violations. If you see some encroachment or something like that, don't call them out or ask them what's going on. Just take the pictures, document, and put it in your report. And that's where Scott and I come in, and we would take it from there. Are there any questions about this at all?
Yeah, the last point, making sure there at some point there will be a new landowner, usually. And they may or may not be familiar with the easement. They hopefully will be aware that there is an easement. But one thing to be aware of is they may actually be, this is a little unusual, but they may be hostile toward the easement and kind of wish it wasn't there. And so making sure you're paying attention to what they're saying and trying to build a good relationship with a new landowner is really important. Most of the time, these places are sold as conservation properties, like the Ellis easement was sold fairly recently. The original landowners passed away. The kids wanted to sell the property, and the new landowners are just ecstatic that there's an easement on it and that TP is helping out with the management. So that's usually the case, but it may not be. All right, so what I'm going to go through is the sort of whole process from start to finish of using landscape to do the monitoring. And partly this is we've got a couple people who are new, who haven't used this before. But the other reason for doing this is landscape, the company that makes it, Dendroica LLC, has just a couple of months ago released a really major revision of the web version of Landscape. They updated the mobile app a couple of years ago, which was a little bit of a painful process. But this new version of the web application is really nice. They did an excellent job with it. So I kind of want to show you what it looks like, and even if you've been using it for years. So the first step is to log in. Landscape is a combination of a cloud kind of database that you access through your web browser, plus this mobile app that you use in the field for doing the actual monitoring. So in the manual, the site monitors manual they sent, there's the address to go to, but you log in using your email address and the password that you've created. If you're new, you should have gotten a login email from Nate, and you should respond to that and create your account. So I'm going to log in. And Landscape's kind of probably be a little slow. So this is the screen you get when you first show up. It's got all these little widgets on it, which I find pretty useless, but I don't do much with this screen anyway. The main place you're going to go to is this portfolio menu item right up here. And this has a list of all the TPE properties and stewardship sites, and it's basically all the properties we have in our portfolio. And there are 83 of them, but as I said, those are all individual properties and individual easements. So what I would strongly suggest to make this easier for you is to use this filter and click on this only stewardship sites, first of all. And that'll now restrict it to our stewardship sites, of which we have 50. And then you're probably, as a monitor, you're only really interested in the properties that you have to monitor. Those are the ones that you're going to work on. And you can filter down to that by going down to the bottom here under Team and going to Your Records. And now you get a much shorter list. So these are the properties that I go out and monitor every year, or the stewardship sites, I should say. And some of you only have one or two there. Now it's a much easier list to work with. So I've already gone out and monitored Black Earth Redmond Prairie this year as kind of an example, and also to test out the new version of Landscape and see how it works. So I'm going to kind of use that as an example. And so the first thing you want to do is go to the actual site, and you'll get a map like this. Occasionally, I'll point out, I've already pointed out a bug to the Landscape folks, that sometimes you'll get your map will look like this with all of your site visits overlaid on it. And it's kind of a bug that they said they will eventually fix. But if that happens, you just click on this little layer list and uncheck the site visits, and now you'll get a clean map. So this is the actual map of the property. The place you would start, the first thing you want to do if you have not monitored a property before, or even if you have, it's a good idea to kind of take a look at what's happened in the past. And we've uploaded, for all the fee title properties, we've uploaded all of the management plans. Those are attached documents. So if you click on this little eyeball down here, the document will show up here. It's a little easier to read and print and everything if you click on this little pop-out button up here in the upper right. It'll open the document as a separate tab, and now you can view it a lot more easily and print it out or save it or do whatever you want to do with it. So it's good to familiarize yourself with that, even kind of as an annual exercise. For easements, the equivalent thing would be the baseline report. And that's the initial state of the property when we first took on the easement. That's a very good thing to familiarize yourself with. The other thing in the work are the prior monitoring visits. So if I look at when I monitored Black Earth last year, this is my monitoring path, all the photo points. I can look at individual photos if I want, and just kind of review what I did in the prior years, and also look at how I answered the questionnaire, etc. So that's actually looking at all of the raw data. It's sometimes easier to look at these things if you look at the report. And we've now uploaded all of the prior year monitoring reports into landscape as well. So if you go to this reports menu item, you can click on last year's monitoring report, and the same thing, view the document here, and you can pop it out and do what I just did with the management plan. So I always find it helpful to at least review the last monitoring report, especially if you're new to the site or new to monitoring. You might want to look back a few years and sort of see what the history is and what's been done, and familiarize yourself with where the photo points typically have been, etc. So this is stuff. You can do this on the field on your phone. All that information is there, but it's a lot easier to do at your desk at home on a computer. So that's
real quick,
yeah,
Scott, does anybody have any questions so far? I know
yeah,
landscape can be a lot of information.
yeah. I'm flipping through a lot of stuff pretty quickly here.
That's okay. Mark, go ahead.
Got two quick questions. Do you have the land managers information on that, so you know who to contact, or if it needs updating or
Yes,
anything like that?
yes. The site managers, we're still updating that information. We didn't have a really good list in landscape before, but over on the left side here, there's a contacts button. So for this case, the site manager is Kathy Brock, and I have her contact information, her email and phone number. For the easements, all of them, we've put the current landowners' contact information in there. So you have an easy place to go to find that information. Not all of the sites have the correct contact information. That's something Nate will be working on, making sure we know exactly who the site stewards are and get their contact information into here. But
I also
a
sent
lot of
out
them we do.
I sent out an email to all of you, and if your sites did have an easement, I was sure to include the contact information for the owners of the easements. If for whatever reason you're not able to find the managers or the owners through landscape or through the emails or whatever, please just contact me and I'll be able to get you all the information you need.
My other question, Scott, was, did you trespass when they did the easement last year? Looks like you took a photo point on the neighbors in the middle of their pasture or whatever. Number 14.
Yes, in fact, the first time I monitored this, I noticed that this area was clearly part of the managed prairie here. It had obviously been burned. It was beautiful. And I checked and the trail goes right across there. There is no trail through here. There's a trail right along here. So I checked with Kathy Brock about that. She said, oh yeah, the landowner there lets us manage that. They don't want to turn it over to us, but they're happy to have us manage it. So rather than traipse through here, which I did the first time, I just take a couple pictures of that and say, yep, it's still under management. But yeah, it is a thing to be careful about. You want to respect boundaries, and make sure you're aware of that. Good catch there, Mark.
Thanks.
All right. All right. So that's basically in terms of looking at the prior information, the documents related to the site. That would be kind of what we would suggest that you do. It's up to you, of course. The second thing before you head out into the field is to, let me just get is to set up the landscapes mobile application for using offline when you're out in the field. A lot of the places where we have sites, the internet connectivity is pretty crappy. So it's a really good idea to make sure you have all the information on your mobile device before you head out in the field. And Landscape has a really slick way of doing that. So the first step, if you haven't done this already, is to get this app on your phone or whatever other mobile device you're going to use. There's instructions for doing that in the manual. You get it at the normal app store. When you first open the app, it'll actually show where you're located. This is my house in Middleton here. If you click on this box that says Search Stewardship Sites, it'll show you a list of all the stewardship sites owned by TPE. And if you want to filter this down, it's a really good idea to filter it down to the ones that you're responsible for. Click on this Show Team Records here, and it'll then give you a list that's limited to your sites. If you click on one of the sites, in this case, Black Earth Redmond, it'll bring up a screen that looks like this. It'll center the map on the particular site. It doesn't show my location because I'm still back in Middleton at this point. This is in Black Earth. And you'll get something that looks like this. So there are a couple things you want to do before you head off in the field. The first is to make sure that you have all of the information from the prior site visits. It's incredibly handy to be able to see what you did in prior years or what was done in prior years for monitoring. So the other thing you want to do is make sure everything is synchronized between your phone and the database in the cloud, and then basically turn off your the Wi-Fi connection to the landscape software. It'll leave it running on the rest of your phone. But so the way you do that is the first step is hit this thing down here that says prepare offline. And it'll give you a little warning because it's going to download a bunch of data from all the prior stuff, everything connected with this site. So if you click on yes there, this new little icon button will show up here that's indicating it's downloading information. And that can take a while depending on how much information there actually is for that site. What I've typically done is done all of these at once, and you can stack them up. You can go to the next site and start downloading that, and it'll eventually work your way through them. If you click on that little button, it'll tell you the status. This one, when I clicked on it, it was all ready. It had downloaded everything. And so now this one's ready to go. And I'm ready to head out in the field at this point. So I tell it to work offline and click on this button. And then basically it disconnects the landscape software from Wi-Fi, and it's now functioning offline. So that's all you need to do to get ready for heading out in the field. Are there any questions about that?
So Scott, where do you get the work offline? You have to click on the download icon?
Yeah, you click on this little download little cloud thing up here. And it'll bring up this screen. It'll tell you the status of that particular one, and that's where that menu item is.
Okay, does the, I see a little green thing there. Does it tell you when it's done downloading, or do you just have to click on it every once in a while?
You have to click on it. If you're doing multiple ones at the same time,
Mhm.
you'll have a list here, and it'll show you, each one will have a little progress bar, and it'll show you where it is with each one. So
Yep.
so I now have, thanks to you and some other people, my list is much shorter, but I used to be monitoring 12 different sites every year. So my list is a lot shorter now, but I would set these up and then go have lunch or something and come back and they'd be all done. If it's just one record, it doesn't take all that long. All right, so once you get to the site, if you turn on landscape again, you'll notice this little button here, which is the synchronize button that we'll get to in a minute. It has this little yellow icon on it that shows that Wi-Fi is disconnected for landscape. And again, if I go to the search stewardship sites and open up Black Earth Retman, it'll show the site. And so what I now want to do is actually start the site visit in landscape. So if I open the site and click on this site visits, it'll ask you to choose a site visit. Ignore this one. I created a little test thing at home that I forgot to delete when I took this screenshot. You'll generally be creating a new site visit, and it should default to annual monitoring. If you click on that that little list box there, it'll have one of those little spinning wheel things. Make sure it says annual monitoring and then hit OK. And that'll bring up the site visit details screen. And then we'll come back to this when we're all done. But what you want to do at this point is start the visit. And so you click on this green start visit. And it'll ask you if you want to update the start times. And this may be a little confusing at first because you're starting the visit, and of course you do. But you may want to, we have some sites that are really large, and you may want to start a monitoring visit and then stop it, go off and have some lunch and come back and start it again, etc. So it allows you to control whether you're updating the start and the stop time anytime that you change the state. So in this case, you definitely want to say, yes, I want to update the start time because this is when I'm starting the visit. And then it goes. I will mention, by the way, all these screenshots and everything I'm saying is all in the manual. So, you know, if you, and we're available for help if you need it. So once the site visit is going, the other thing that I typically do, this is up to you, is I will bring up the prior year site visit. And that's what these little buttons with dates on them are. Those are prior year site visits. And so if I click on that, it will show the track that I followed and where all the photo points were. And I find that really, really helpful. This particular site, there are now some really well-established photo points. And I've done it like 3 or 4 years in a row, exactly the same way. And it's very nice for tracking progress. So if I turn on the prior year's site visit, I can even click on these little photo points and it'll show me the photo itself so I can see what view I was taking and what I saw there last year, etc. So this is really, really helpful. Let's see. So the next thing you're going to want to do, you're showing your location with this little icon with an arrow showing which way the your phone is pointing, which direction it's pointing in. What you're mostly going to be doing is walking around the sites and taking pictures and occasionally making notes. So to take a picture, which is what you're usually going to be doing, you click on the camera button there. and it'll bring up a kind of a camera screen. You can take the picture either landscape or portrait mode. Most often the pictures will be landscape. Occasionally a portrait makes more sense. I've turned the screen, sideways into portrait mode just so you can read it. But this button is obviously what you use to take the picture, the white button. And there are a couple other little controls here that I'll come back to in a second. But as soon as you take the picture, it'll go to a screen that looks like this. It'll show you the picture. If you don't like the picture, if you want to take another one, you can discard it right away and it'll go right back to the camera. If you want to jot down a quick description, you can click on this describe button and it'll open up a little text window, and you obviously don't want to write a big long description here, but if you just make a quick note to yourself about why you took this picture and something just to remind you later, you'll be able to edit this later when you get back into your computer and the web app. So if you're happy with the picture and you've done your description, then you hit this keep button, and that takes you back to the camera. You now have a choice. If you want to take another picture of something different at the same location, the same photo point, like maybe 180 degrees or something like that, you can just take another picture and it'll record that as part of the same photo point. But if you're ready to move on, then just click on new point, and it'll put the next picture into a new photo point. Does that make sense? It makes your map a lot more readable if the pictures that you take at a particular spot are not all separate photo points, if they're all kind of multiple pictures at one photo point. And if you're ready to move on and you want to go back to the map view, then hit the close. And now you can walk on, and when you're ready to take the next picture, hit the camera icon. So that's kind of the basic process of conducting the site visit. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Mark.
Okay.
I got a
Yeah,
question,
go.
Scott.
Yeah.
You got two properties. You got the TPE owned properties and private lands with the easement on them that you're monitoring.
Yep.
Okay. And it's mainly looking for encroachment from, and you're walking around the property boundary. Are there cases where it would pay to go inside the property just to check on certain things?
Yes.
Or whatever?
Yeah, we focus a lot on the boundary, but you really should be kind of trying to do as best you can to look through, what's going on in the interior as well. And particularly in easements, that's important because you're not only looking for what neighbors are doing to the property, but you're also looking at what the landowner might be doing inside the property, which might also be a violation of the easement. So, in this case, this property, I can get good pictures of the entire interior from the boundary line. So this one's pretty easy. But a lot of other properties, you have to kind of hike around and at least check the condition of the interior of the property for sure.
And with that being said, some of the properties are very large. And inaccessible. So there's times when some of the monitors will be out there, and there's no way that they're going to be able to stay on the boundary line just because it's so overgrown or it's elevation change. We don't expect you to do an exact boundary walk. You can, if you need to cut across, like in this example, if he had to go from picture 8 to picture 3 right through the middle because everything south of that was inaccessible, that's fine. An alternative, what you could do is maybe right in the middle of that field, take a picture south so we can have a visual of the property looking south that you weren't able to walk to. And you can make a note of that on in the description of that picture as well. But unless you're Zoe Pierce, who is an absolute machine and just loves to hike all day, we don't we don't expect you to really do the entire boundary line if it's not in your ability to do so. So don't
Yeah,
push yourself beyond what you feel comfortable doing. Just try your very best to document everything you can. Take pictures from a distance if you think you can do that as well.
yeah, you can only do what you can do, and yeah, we have some properties where, like our Iris Drive property, this whole southern third of the property, I don't think anybody from TPE has ever been in there because it's one of these gigantic buckthorn jungles on a really steep hill. And there's no way to get in there. So one of the monitors tried and he kind of gave up and turned back. He forgot to bring his machete. Um, so yeah, just do the best you can. Okay, so now when you're done with the site visit, it'll look something like this. The yellow dots there are the photo points for the current site visit. And the sort of light blue, kind of wider line is the path you followed. You can't see the previous site visit underneath because I've followed it pretty much exactly and taken photos in exactly the same spot, but sometimes you'll see some evidence of that. So if you've kind of done everything and reached the end and you're ready to terminate the site visit, you click on this little button right here on the left side that kind of looks like a little trail with dots on it. That's the current site visit button, and that will bring you back to the site visit details page. You can also get to this by clicking on or no, you can't get it. Sorry. Click on this button. And when you're really ready to stop the visit, you've done everything you intend to do in terms of walking around, taking pictures and notes. Click on this stop visit. It'll again ask you if you want to update the stop time. If you're really done with the visit, go ahead and do that and make sure you stop it. We've occasionally had people not stop landscape and it records their trip home and to the grocery store. And yeah, it gets a little crazy. So please remember to stop your visit and update the stop time if that's appropriate. At this point, you can go home if you want. I personally have found it to be helpful while everything is fresh in my mind to scroll down and begin to fill out some of the form that is required for the report. Most of the questions on this are just sort of yes, no, sort of multiple choice questions. But in cases where you answer yes, it will give you a place to start to describe what you saw. And again, you don't need to write a complete detailed description, but just a note, there was a sign falling over here or something like that. Something just to remind you. I found this to be really useful because these forms are really a good list of all the things that we're asking you to look out for. And you may be reminded, oh, I did see something about that. Maybe I ought to go back and check that. Something like that. So this is just sort of a good way to do it. And when you're on site, you can go back, you can reopen the site visit, take another picture, etc. It's just good to scroll through this while you're sitting in the car getting ready to go home. That's just my personal advice.
And where do you find that, Scott?
If you click on this, when the site visit is active, before you've stopped it, this little site visit button below the download button, that'll bring up this site visit details. And the form is just scrolling down on this screen. If you just keep scrolling down, you'll run into it.
So if you stop the visit, will you still be able to see that, or you do that before you stop?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah. Once you stop the visit, as long as you're on this screen, you can go
okay,
down and update anything on the screen. If you need to go back and take pictures, then restart the visit and take pictures and then stop the visit again. So you can feel free to do that. Just that's the way that works.
thanks.
Whoops.
I-
So the last thing here before I go back to the landscape software, when you get home, you want to synchronize. You want to upload everything you got on your phone now to the landscape database. This is something occasionally people forget to do, and they wonder why their visit doesn't show up on the website. And the key to that is the synchronize button, which is this little thing with the circular arrows. Right now, we have this turned off. The internet connection to landscape is turned off. So when you click on that button, it'll first ask you if you want to go back online again and say yes, and then it'll start synchronizing. And again, that can take a little while to do. And those little arrows will go around and around until it's done. It usually takes just a couple of minutes. And then at that point, you're done with your phone and you can go back to the landscape software. So, so the last step in this is completing the report. And I'm going to switch back to the landscape software here. So if I go back to the site in the landscape software, this is the Black Earth Redmond Prairie. Here's the site visit I just completed. And what you need to do now is go out and fill out the rest of this report. And this is really one of the most powerful aspects of landscape is you don't have to write a report from scratch. You basically just fill out this questionnaire, answer the questions, write up a summary, and you're done. The rest of it, the formatting of the photos, the tracking of where they were taken, all of that is done automatically. It's really cool. So this first part will be downloaded from your phone. One of the things you want to make sure you have is what method you use. Sometimes people drive around in really big sites. They'll drive around in a vehicle. So you can add that to it if you want. But definitely make sure you have foot in there if you actually walked around. I would leave the summary till the end. A lot of the reports that we get are lacking summaries, and that's one of the things we're getting our accreditation with the Land Trust Alliance renewed this year, and that's one of the things they dinged us on is a lot of our reports didn't have summaries. So I'll come back to that in a minute, but I would skip that for now and go. You can also this time tracking and documents. This is all stuff that was automatically loaded in landscape, so you can just ignore those. The big thing you want to do is do this form. The form is fairly long. It's got 60 questions for fee title property. The easement one is a lot shorter, but the answers are mostly sort of written responses. We're looking at revising these forms, but we decided not to do that this year. We will probably tackle that next year. So it's really just a bunch of kind of yes, no questions. But for any question that you answer yes, you really need to put in some kind of description of why you answered yes. So if I go down and find one here, so even though this site has been owned originally by the Nature Conservancy and by TPE for a long time, I actually noticed an encroachment, and I'm not sure if it actually is an encroachment, if I'm wrong about this, but at this photo point 18, I noticed again, I now have the habit of standing on the corner of the property, and the property line runs right along here. So I noticed basically the neighbor's yard, their propane tank and part of the area they're maintaining as their lawn is actually on our property, at least according to landscape. This has obviously been the way for decades. Um, but technically it's an encroachment. So it is something I'm going to be bringing up to the Land Protection Committee, and maybe Kathy Brock has an answer to why that is. I actually added, I blew this, the map up and took a screenshot of it and added it to that just to kind of make clear here what I'm talking about. This is what landscape thinks the property boundary is. And you can clearly see the propane tank is on the, their house is set back by almost exactly 25 feet, which is the standard setback in Dane County. So I suspect everybody knows about this, but I at least wanted to document it. So that's kind of just an example. So anything you see as a that you answer yes to, you need to put a description. I didn't really have very many here. The only other one was there were some signs falling down. So that's kind of the first thing, is to go through the form. And again, I want to emphasize your job is to point out anything that you see, anything that you think might be an issue. You don't have to decide whether it's a real issue or not. That's for others to do, and you certainly don't have to address it. But your job is to point out things, because you're going to be the only one from TPE that sees these properties in a lot of cases. So once you've done that, the next step is to actually go back to the photos and just take a look at all of them. So in landscape, you can click on the photo point, and these are the photos. If you click on the photo, you have a place here to put a description. And now you can write as long a description as you want. And the description that you entered in the field will show up here. In this case, I'm just pointing out these two signs have problems. One of them's broken and the other, the signpost, is falling over. Not a good look for the parking lot for a publicly accessible site. If you click on the photo itself, you can see it in full screen in a separate tab, which makes it easier to do. You can delete these photos. That's a little confusing how to do that. You check on it, and now this little trash can shows up. You can delete photos. You can also rotate them if you want to. Sometimes people hold the camera backwards and all their photos are upside down, so you can fix that. And as I just showed you, you can add photos. You can upload any photo that you have on your computer and have it be attached to that photo point. The other thing I would point out is, do not put the description of your photo here. This is the description of the photo point, not the photo. And our report template doesn't show those descriptions. So if you write something here, and this often is something that people do if they only have one photo at a photo point, don't put the description here. What you want to do is click on the photo and put the description with the photo. So that's kind of the one little confusing thing that is a mistake people sometimes make. So once you've gone through all the photos and gotten those all looking, now at this point, I would go back and write a summary. And the summary should have two things. One is your general assessment of the condition of the property. And number two, a brief summary of any issues that you observed. And this is to draw attention to them so that when this gets reviewed, it's a good place to point it out. So once you've kind of done all that, the very last step is to go ahead and run the report. because this is just the data for the report. And the way you do that is go to this little Run Report button. We only have one template for these reports, so click the Monitoring Visit Report, and it will now automatically generate your report and format it. We've changed the formatting of the template to make it a little easier to read and to get some additional information on it. But here's the answers to all of your form questions. There's the map of your site visit, and then all of the photos with all of your descriptions nicely attached to them. At the bottom of the page, you see there's a little warning here. There's a place for you to sign. And the way you do that is just to click on this and type your name in. And oops, can't even type my own name. And then if you want to use an image file for your signature, you can upload that if you want to. I do so many of these, I bothered to do that. So now this is signed and date stamped. And that's one of the accreditation requirements, is all of our monitoring reports have to be signed and dated by the monitor. So it won't let you leave until that's done. And then if you find something missing or something that you want to change in here, you can discard the report, and that'll take you back to the data, and you can edit it in the data. You can't edit this. And then you can, what we recommend doing in the manual is save and finalize. So it'll now save this report, and now it's being saved as a PDF. That takes a little while for the website to do that, but it'll eventually show up as a separate document. And then the very last step in this whole thing is for you to notify Nate that you've completed this, so that he can go in and review the report, and we will take it from there. And then have a beer or a glass of wine or whatever. You're done with the site. So with that, oops.
I'm gonna real quick. I mentioned earlier that we encourage everybody to go visit their site many times. You only, like I said, you only need to do one report, but to be familiar with it is just that much better. Many monitors choose to do their actual report in the fall, because a lot of the land is just too overgrown and inaccessible during summertime, or even sometimes even in spring. That's totally fine. We ask, these reports are all given to us by the end of the year. If you do choose to do it in the fall, please try to get it done before the snow hits. When it is snowing, it's sometimes difficult to get a good visual on the ground and just the landscape. If it does snow, that's, and you have to go out in the snow, that's fine too. It might be more work for you to have to hike through it, but that is fine.
I got stuck with that last year because I broke my ankle on Labor Day, and I couldn't get to a lot of the sites until kind of mid-December. And by then it was, some of them were a little hard to traipse around in, especially with a recovering broken ankle.
Yeah, but if you do choose to do it in the fall, please don't wait too long. Just try to get it done, when you're able to as well. So, does anybody have any questions about any of this? Mark?
Yeah, I've got a question on the use of these landscape. I'm going to be monitoring, I can't pronounce the name, over at
Giordano, yeah.
Yep, Sand Barrens. What we need out there, I can figure out how to go around the property and do a super job. I think that's not difficult to do. What I'd like to see out there is used landscape to do photo points out there, because right now we're at 2023, we're gonna be doing $100,000 worth of management. So it'd be nice to go in the property and do some photo points. Forget the monitoring, just to monitor, just take photos of the photo points to see what I'm getting at. They could be monitoring the photo points is what I'm getting at too. But has anybody with TPE been doing that? Or another comment I've got is, and all the signs that you got out there, has anybody at TPE on their fee properties went around and GPS did all the sites all the signs, whether they be survey signs, boundary signs, identification sign, informational signs. Has anybody did that to the property so they know? You can bring up a screenshot showing where all the signs are.
Well, that's
We,
a
yeah,
go
we
ahead, Scott.
haven't done that ever. It would be possible actually to do that in landscape.
It would be.
You can even create a map layer for something like that. We've never done it, but the tools are all there. I would suggest though, Mark, you'll be the first monitor doing
Yeah.
a brand new property. And I think the photo points that you select for the property in your first monitoring report are going to be really, really important. So it's important to give that some thought. And the monitoring report itself will be a really important record, because with an easement, we would sort of get what you're talking about with a baseline report. But when we do a fee title property, we typically don't do a baseline report. But your first monitoring report, I agree with you. The photo points are really, really critical. And I would maybe even do an extra job. You may not need to do all of them in the following years, but it'd be really good to get a good record of the property the first time.
Yeah,
But
Mark, you're in a really cool position to, like Scott said, you're the first one to do the report for the Giordano property. So really, you're setting the standard for the future on this site. If you are going about and decide to take your photos at the locations of the signs, that's the best case scenario for yourself and for the future, because now everybody's going to know just that much more information when they come back each year.
Yeah, it
So,
is important. I noticed a couple of years ago at Black Earth Redmond, which is, a site that's been protected for a long time. It has a bunch of state natural area signs around the boundary, and they're all made out of plastic, and almost every one of them is broken. And so I took pictures of a lot of them, and some of the other signs have problems. So I've actually done a little bit of what you talked about, but I think it'd be a good idea to know where we have signs on these properties.
another thing that I was just thinking about, when I do the first monitoring out there, I could do an in-depth thing by doing quite a few photo points in the interior, which I think you're going to. And future monitoring doesn't require you to do all the photo points of every
Correct.
last, right? So, but they'd be there for if we wanted to do them every 5 years or after a burn or whatever. You see,
Yep.
so I think we should go out there to start with and do
Mhm.
as many points as we can with photos.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah, this site is actually going to get, because they've been doing multiple, plant surveys out there. It's getting surveyed like crazy, so that's great.
Yeah, and Mark, your site actually, because it is so new, I'm still waiting on a shape file to come back to us so I can upload that to your Giordano file. But I don't believe that you have a map yet in landscape for your site yet. So we're still working on getting that uploaded at this time.
Then the question I've got yet, so Scott, is this the first year you mentioned about the plastic signs that have been in tough shape out at Black Earth Redmond?
I called it out a year or two ago, but one of the things we haven't been doing a good job of, to be honest, and this was again something that got caught in our accreditation renewal, has been to systematically review the monitoring reports. We've been good at getting the monitoring done, but we need to review the monitoring reports. That any issues identified by the monitors need to get called out, and then they need to be brought to the Land Protection Committee for a decision about action. The committee can decide not to do anything, or can decide to take action. That's up to the committee. But we haven't had a systematic process for doing that, and that's one of the things we're putting in place. So this year, at the end of the year, the Land Protection Committee will probably get a whole list of issues to consider, that come from this monitoring activity. We haven't really done that systematically before.
Well, here's my comment, Scott. Do we have to go to the Land Protection Committee for this? Nate's going to get the reports and he's going to read that the signs need redoing.
Mhm.
Kathy Brock's the manager. And I assume Nate would have the signs sent out to him. Kathy Brock doesn't have to talk to natural areas and say, how could I get some 6 signs for my property? I assume Nate would send those out, or somebody from TPE would be taking care of all the boundary signs and that. And so you see what I'm getting at?
That's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's probably actually not a Land Protection Committee issue. It might be a Land Management Committee thing to think about. Somebody, a question would be who spends the money to do that, et cetera. So, but yeah, it needs to be addressed because it's pretty crappy looking actually. Um,
Mhm.
they're unfortunately they're all plastic signs and they've just kind of weathered with age and gotten cracked and beat up.
Yeah, we've actually been looking. The last signs that we ordered were metal and were really nice. So we're
Yeah.
probably going to be trying to move forward with investing in signs that will last a lot longer than the cheap plastic ones in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something, though, I agree with you, Mark, that TP's been expanding the staff gradually here, and tasks like this are much better handled by a staff person than trying to get a committee to try and take action on something. But some of these things, like for example, this, propane tank that's been sitting on Black Earth Prairie probably for 30 years. um, the Land Protection Committee needs to look at that. I may be wrong about it. I don't know, but it needs to be looked at. And that's something that's a little different. It needs some careful consideration and decision making.
Mhm.
So.
Well, good. Well, thank you guys for your questions. Before we wrap up, I just want to ask, does anybody have anything else they want to comment on, or any final questions at all?
Are you going to
Excellent.
send out the recordings to everybody? It's real
Yeah,
helpful to look at it. I mean,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
take any
And
notes on this link,
this
but
video, thank you for being here for this video. We're actually going to be using this training for future. So you've all made the cut. You're in the movie. So we'll send you your royalties. But well, thank you all. Thank you so much. Don't feel like you're alone out there. If you need help, I'm here. You can always call me, email me if you have any questions. I know this was a lot of information. It could be pretty overwhelming, but I saw many of you taking notes on a lot of this stuff. So appreciate you really putting the time in to learn this. And it just gets easier. Every year it just gets easier and easier. And once landscape, it might seem like a lot of technology at first, and there's a lot of slides and whatnot. But after you get in there and get the feel for it, it just makes a lot more sense than just seeing it on a PowerPoint presentation. So, but great. Well, thank all of you, and thank you, Scott, for recording. I think you can probably stop the recording now. But
Nate, can you and Scott just hang on after the others leave?
Sure.
sure, yeah, absolutely.